This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Well, good day everyone, it's Liam Garman here, Managing Editor of Real Estate at Momentum Media, the team that bring you the Smart Property Investment Show. And today is our second part of our episode unpacking our 5 big predictions for the property market over 2025. That is coming up in just a second.
So you've got productivity issues here, and it needs to be addressed and right through government, right? But the panacea for all of this is don't worry about it. Let's just tax property investors more money.
Yeah.
That's it. And this is the fourth point around property taxes. It's ruined in many ways the Victorian economy because, you know, you've got some significant issues there around property price reduction. A lot of people say it's great because it's cheaper to buy it, but you know, property investors are leaving Victoria because they're just sick of getting taxed. I saw, you know, effective at the start of January, now Airbnb, you get slapped if your Airbnb thing, like 7.5%, just to fix a problem that was caused by the government.
Yeah.
You know, you can only take so much from property investors.
Yeah, it's the way in which we are approaching, the way in which we are dealing with public policy in this country is it's in a parasitic way. It's what am I getting out of it, right? Now, if you ask we're uniquely exposed to it because of our input and our involvement in our defence and national security portfolio, which for people who aren't familiar with it, head over to defenceconnect.com.au. Shameless plug there. Figured I'd fit that one in. Where you look at it and when you realise that on current trajectory, NDIS spending is tipped to eclipse defence spending at a time when our world's not necessarily getting any safer, particularly in our part of the world. And the Deputy PM was
Richard Marles, the Defence Minister.
Has stated that on the government's current reprioritised and reconfigured defence spending, that we will reach about 2.4% of GDP, which will be about $100 billion by 2030-34. Annual
spending, yep.
Now, NDIS spending is going to be significantly more than that. Now, ask yourself if, as an Australian taxpayer, when in the past we didn't have the NDIS, we didn't have Social Security, there were private organisations either through Salvos or the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church who provided those services and as arms to those organisations, to those people, those vulnerable people in society, and arguably the outcomes were better.
Yeah.
Is that a meaningful and a valuable return on investment as an Australian taxpayer where you know you can see the rorts are happening and little to nothing's happening, but at the same time our security is getting worse?
Well, you got to remember also is that, and there's an argument to say NDIS supports all Australians, right? You might not necessarily subscribe it to yourself, but there might be someone in your family that gets benefits from it, all that sort of stuff. National Security supports all Australians, right?
Yeah.
And you saw it when there was a change of government in the old government under the Morrison government. I think there was a lot more narrative and discussions around the security environment. During the honeymoon phase of the current government, when everyone thought, oh, yeah, this is great, we've got change, right? You had Penny Wong out there sort of making friends with China and pretty much went, this whole security thing's been overcooked. Everything's okay, nothing to see over here. And you haven't really heard anything about it. And I don't think most Australians actually appreciate the nuances of the security arrangement or the security situation for Australia right now.
And I think it's because, to your point, Phil, I think it's because we, in the last government, and I can say we because I did work in the last government, was we focused on the hardware. We focused on the bullets, the bombs, the tanks, the ships, all the big sexy stuff that, you know, gets people like me, gets our engines going like, yeah, this is really cool. Whereas now, in the world that we live in, national security is not just how many effects you can put downrange. It's how viable is your economy? How resilient is it to economic shocks?
Yep.
How resilient is it to Red Sea? 98% of our liquid fuel and natural gas, because, you know, even though we're one of the world's largest natural gas producers, we still have to import natural gas, which is another inflationary pressure because our cost of energy is through the roof, comes via the Red Sea. So it's every aspect of it.
I'm happy you said that. So essentially this is a discussion around national resilience, right?
Yeah.
What the integrity of Australia, that irrespective of global forces or domestic forces, the ability to continue to grow and evolve and provide a safer, secure place to live, right? It's a great place to live, Australia. So housing is integral to national resilience. And you've got to remember, housing is it's a mechanism of utility. It's where people live, where they raise family, and it's where they should be happy and safe, right? That's what housing is. Now, we're talking about property investment. Well, a third of all Australians live in rental accommodation. It's a very important part of the Australian economy to provide. A third of housing for Australians is provided by individual, inverted commas, mum and dad property investors. And that's largely who they are. Mum and dad property investors between one or two investment properties. So, this point around property taxes, having a crack at them every time thinking they're rich and they're wealthy and it's a gift that keeps on giving, you can only take so much before you'll fracture stuff. And what happens if there's less rental accommodation in the market, it means that rents will go up. And if there's less rental accommodation in the market, that means you're going to have more people sitting in cars because the government ain't coming out quickly to be property investors again, So this is the big thing. Now, this goes for the point around government intervention. The government needs to intervene where it needs to intervene, but it needs to allow market economies to be a market economies. And you can go back to your political theory or your economic theories, however you want to view it, right? When the government gets involved in housing, they typically do it in the wrong way.
Yeah.
One of them is around just taxing people more. And you've seen some idiotic
stamp duty.
You've seen some real idiotic, more recent policies around tax when you saw the Queensland Premier coming out saying, we're going to tax you across all the property you have in Australia rather than what you hold in Queensland. Thankfully, we got that shut down and pulled, right? But you've had a change of government in Queensland recently, and I think that might be a view towards how Australia will go. But the government needs to intervene, the government being state, federal and local. The government needs to intervene appropriately and sensibly. So the federal government should be applying pressure on local governments to provide more smarter, more sensible development planning situation, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't get anything through government. And obviously it's a state issue, but the government needs to intervene in facilitating pathways for growth, change and innovation, not stifling growth through applying taxes. So this is going to be a key theme for 2025 up to the election and after it, is that where should the government get involved? Now they're they're taking shared equity in, help me buy schemes, right?
Yeah.
Like why is the government, I've got to ask the question, why is the government co-investing with Australian individuals and also banks to actually help people buy 40,000. Was it 40,000? 40,000 properties it's a rounding of a decimal point.
Now, there's a conspiracy theory side of that argument, and that is that you will own nothing and you will be happy. But we know that from just sitting down on the editorial floor and overhearing and being involved in some of the conversations with our younger colleagues.
Yeah.
And Liam and I were talking about this the other day. Basically, if you haven't bought a home by 35, you're essentially locked out of the housing market. And
is it what they think?
That's our own independent analysis based on a lot of anecdotal evidence in the conversations downstairs.
Is this a house to live in or a house to invest in? So this is it, right?
Yeah, but it's also, and this is something that I think a lot of people that isn't involved in the conversation, right? It's not just about having a stake in the market. It's about having a meaningful stake in the market.
Yeah.
And I'm working through the process of putting a book together. And
this is your soft launch.
This is my soft launch of
Cooper's Guide to Everything.
Yeah. Ramblings of a Madman. But I've got the title, and that is
The Sky's Falling In.
No, it's the world we were promised.
Okay.
And for a lot of young Australians, we feel like we did all the right things. We listened to mum and dad. We went to school. We got a job through university. We studied. We cracked the books. We went and ticked all the boxes, but it was for nothing.
Maybe. And to pick up a point you said beforehand, and I say it quite often, Australia in many ways, the Australia that we've had post-war, World War II we're talking about, into the, my parents are baby boomers, I'm an Xer, you guys are Ys.
No, millennials.
Yeah, millennials. Yeah.
Missed out on X by that much.
By that much. But, like what Australia has been up until this point versus what Australia will look like into the future are very, very different things.
Yeah, and that's to your point earlier around who's having that conversation.
Who's having, no one, like this NIMBYism around and going back to government intervention, like they don't want to facilitate development because they think Australians should be all living on quarter-acre blocks. Like that's an idea of the post-war environment, right? Like we need to go up, we need to go denser, we need to.
But why should our generation, and we've had this conversation quite a lot, is why should our generation be forced to miss out on what the baby boomers and Generation X?
But who says that's better?
Well,
we're
self-reported happiness, health, lifestyle, the whole gamut.
I think, but there is a way that you can have your cake and eat it too. When you're looking at some of these councils which have approvals in excess of 200 days is quite mind-blowing. You're always going to have people that are going to tend to be happier to live in an apartment to live in the inner city. I am one. For example, why should it take over 200 days to approve building in North Sydney? That is an area which we all work in North Sydney. Phil, you and I live in North Sydney in the area. You walk around North Sydney on the weekend, it's kind of a ghost town. There's really not that many people. It's an area that would actually economically boom from greater high-density housing. And there will be people that would love that. There would be people that would love their 5-minute metro into the CBD. That is a lifestyle that would ticket for a lot of people. I think we have to accept that we do have to increase that supply. I think the Minns government in New South Wales has done a good first step with that, which is the pre-approved housing designs, which you can kind of expedite your DAs on to quickly build, rapidly build. I think that's good. Yeah. But there has to be elements where councils can say, yep, okay, we're a stone's throw away from Sydney CBD, let's build up.
Do you guys subscribe to this idea that's right of every Australian to own the home they live in?
I think that's a loaded question.
No, but Australia, and it's a recent thing, Australia has created this narrative of that, right? If you go back 100 years, more people rented than owned property. Go and look at the numbers, right? It's only really in the 70s and 80s that really swung towards being a nation of home ownership rather than renters.
I'd say from the 50s on. It was one
really
of the
accelerated through the 70s and the 80s, right?
One of the core tenets of the Menzies government was to get as many Australians into buying their own home. And I understand.
But this goes back to your generation, though, is that you talk about health and happiness and economic engagement and fulfillment. One of the biggest debates you see is that a lot of people say it's impossible as a young person to get into housing. I get people on the Smart Property Investment Show, younger than you guys, right, who have got large portfolios in their 20s, and they're going, I don't understand where this logic or this psyche comes from.
Yeah, okay.
But
so
home ownership is still available for the majority of Australians.
Yes, so I think it's
you might be an investor, you might be an owner-occupier. However, what you buy in your 20s is not what you're buying in your 50s, right? And again, this has been hijacked, right? This is expectation for younger people to get what they should be getting. You can't compare your Chapter 2 with someone's Chapter 8.
No.
But the issue you have today is that most people are comparing themselves with their Chapter 8 because they see it on social media and therefore, woe is me, I'm not getting it. Get into it.
So it's expectation versus reality. So what you're seeing over the course of 2-3 decades is a decline in what people's financial world looks like. To your question, do you think you should have the right to own the home? No. This is where it becomes a mentality thing. So I grew up in the UK. It's very common in the UK to rent. It's very common in the UK to have 50-year, 99-year leases. I have well-to-do family members that rent. I have well-to-do family members that are on 99-year leases because when you're in the City of London, you don't really have supply of stock to buy. And that is a normal thing. And no one really bats an eyelid at it. The challenge from extrapolating that expectation of what you would have in cities like New York or Tokyo or big areas where renting is normal, even for very economically prosperous people, is supplanting that to the psyche of a generation or probably 2 or 3 generations of Australians that the expectation was in my mid-20s, I buy the house, I get the dog, I have the child, and then I have this very linear growth path.
And we're getting married 10 years later, by the way.
Yeah. So my point broadly is no, it's not their right. However, it's people seeing in real time that what they expected when they were 20 years younger is now not achievable.
But there's an argument that it is still achievable because everyone always uses this this benchmark of, okay, the cost of the average salary in order to buy a house, right? Like, you can still jump on your phone right now, look at Canterbury in Sydney. You can still buy a 1 and a 2 bedroom apartment in that area, which is literally 25 minutes from the Sydney CBD, probably around that, for an index benchmark of what the average Australian salary is, right? Or Sydney salary is. You can still get that. So you can go and buy that place in Canterbury, 2-bedroom apartment.
Phil, you're talking about a 1-bedroom apartment.
No,
that's
2-bedroom.
That's very different.
I'm going to jump
for a young 25-year-old. I think it's more than enough.
I'm going to jump in here now. In 2 points in today's on news.com.au. Looking at the competitors, there's been analysis that in order to get a mortgage and be comfortable in servicing it, you need to have a household income of between $200,000 and $500,000 a year. Right? That's an issue, right? Then what you have is that.
So are you saying that's fact, or you're just saying that's misinformation?
That's the reporting, right? That's the reporting. I don't know if it's fact. I can speak anecdotally to it.
Yeah.
Now, we have, as a population, we have an aging population, right?
Well, over 40 now. New South Wales is the average age. The first time it's ever been over 40.
Immigration isn't going to solve that problem because we are importing people that are sitting within that 35 to 40 year often, right? But there was a study conducted by HSBC that said that for every 1% increase in interest rates, there is a correlating 10% drop in the birth rate. Now, we know that from studies conducted in the UK, Canada, as well as the US, that most people in that 25 to 40-ish age demographic would like to have more children than what they have. They can't afford it. And you cannot raise, there are some exceptions, but you can't raise 2 or 3 children in a 2-bedroom apartment. Is it comfortable? Not really.
In a capital city, you might not be able to.
No. Now, yes, there is a need to calibrate expectations, 100%. Yeah. But even in my hometown of Wollongong, there are 2-bedroom fibro houses that are going for 1.6, 1.7, up to $2 million. Now, for somebody who's commuting, now not every workplace is as flexible as ours is. Thank you for that, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome.
But, for them to be able to get in, they don't go to Wollongong, they have to go to Nowra.
Yeah. Because
you basically, for all intents and purposes, you skip over Kiama, you skip over Gerringong, because the average price, the mean price in Gerringong and Kiama is anywhere between $2.5 and $3 million.
Really?
Yeah. Now, So then you go to Nowra, and then it's a 2.5, 3-hour one-way trip to Central. Now, that's where it becomes an issue. And then what you add on top of that is, back to your earlier points around taxation and hitting investors, but hitting average Australians, we are then being asked to have fewer children, but our financial burden to pay for the healthcare, the benefits, and the social security of baby boomers, the top end of Gen X, is disproportionately falling on us and the generations under us. So then we're going, well, hang on a second, the social contract has been broken, which is a major issue, and I think it will be a major political issue for young Australians as they look forward to the 2025 election. And depending, there's still a lot of policy work to be done in the housing space. It will continue to be an issue until we come to terms with the main driving forces.
So 10 years ago, 10 years ago, your lot, you younger folk, I've got a decade or so on you guys, right?
Yeah.
You cared about climate change, right?
Oh, I didn't. Did you?
I'm talking about as a cohort, right? Like, young people today are now saying the social contract has been. You're not really young anymore. You guys are middle-aged, to be fair.
Oh, come
Steve,
on.
You are.
I'm only 35. Come on.
But it would appear that the younger cohort, let's call it that now, are more concerned with this social contract being broken and why are we now inheriting all these issues for the future rather than climate change type policies, right? So as this group are growing up, they're starting to have a realisation that it's not easy, it's hard, and the expectations of a life where you're going to have to work and be responsible versus maybe a more laissez-faire life where you just can relax and be all about me. It's a rude shock and awakening. And this is what Australia needs. Australia needs to understand and appreciate that it's hard.
Yeah,
it's not easy.
That, yeah.
You know, but then you see your story there on news.com.au, which is absolute BS, saying that you need to be a household income. Do you know how many households have incomes of $250,000 in Australia?
No.
I reckon not a lot.
Percent.
Most don't, right?
Yeah.
Most don't. But then you get stuff like this and people go, oh, God. You know, the median salary now is like 90-something grand across Australia.
But even
so you've got two people on the median, there's 180. Like, that means you're way underwater. So people are getting sold a myth about what they think life should be versus the realities of what life is.
Well, okay, I will give you
and we're sort of rambling on an air a bit, but I don't know. But let's bring it back to the election.
But that's to my point. It will be a major political driving force, not just in Australia. It'll be a major political driving force across Western Europe.
Yeah.
It'll be the same in the UK. We're already starting to see the groundswell of that. Same in the US, in Canada, and it's going to take several election cycles to work through. And to your point earlier, Phil, like, where's the ambition?
We need a 50-year, 100-year plan, not a 4-year plan, right? And, you know, it's a tough one. It's a really, really tough one to unravel and good luck. But sort of, I'll call it a knee-jerk response to it. I know how we'll fix this for younger people. We'll use government's money provided by the Australian taxpayer.
Let's not say government money. We're using our money.
Taxpayers' money to eradicate the debt that people have built up with HEX debts. Like, come on.
Yep.
You know, are these people who went – if I'm investing in reducing people's HEX debts, did those people really need to go to university? Why didn't they become an electrician? Why didn't they become a plumber? If I got to start paying for that sort of stuff, I want a voice on whether or not we should be vetoing people going to university.
Well, that's another podcast. Because, I mean, the answer is yes. I mean, we do have too many universities, but they're also their Commonwealth-supported places, so they get subsidised by the taxpayer.
Have you still got a HEX debt? You pay yours off.
I've got a very minor HEX debt, but I did a master's as well.
Okay.
So
I've paid mine off.
You paid yours off.
My master's
but
off
at the same time, like, I don't regret it because that degree set me up. It wasn't.
Look at you now. You're talking about.
But yeah, I mean, I did a finance degree.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I intrinsically understand this. You know, but I mean, yeah, if you've got a Commonwealth supported place to do, like, I think it's very reasonable to say these Mickey Mouse degrees do exist. Yeah, they shouldn't exist. And my heart, actually, I do agree with what Steve's saying for young people. My heart goes out to them because if you're 18 years old and you're sold this lie that you have to go to university, if you want a career, if you want to make money, you have to go to university, and they end up going to some second-rate university, doing some degree that no one gives a crap about, that will never help them, and they leave 30 grand of debt. When you're 18, you are as dumb as dog poo. You don't know any better, and your peers and your parents sold you a really dumb idea.
And society did.
And to be fair, I have sympathy for all of this, right?
Oh, no, I don't
want anyone to think what I'm saying, I'm just trying to debate the issue.
But I feel very bad for them. I don't think that they should be given HEX debt relief. I don't think they should ever have been in a position to go to university.
Yeah. So this is my point, back to politics. Steve, this is your game, and less so about you as well, Liam. Where is the leadership from our political apparatus and our leaders to actually sell a narrative and shape a bureaucratic structure to be supportive of our younger people not feeling as though they're getting ripped off? This is the big question for the election.
Well, Pine tried it a decade ago, didn't he? Pine was education minister.
He was, yes. But I think you're putting the cart before the horse. I think it's incumbent on the Australian public to demand better from their elected representatives.
We're going to be demanding different stuff.
But they are. But you still get a good weather vane of the key issues, right? Because it doesn't matter how disparate your engagement is. There's going to be a Venn diagram at some point where the core issues overlap.
And this goes back to the point of the Morrison victory in 2019. And he spoke about, there's the miracle or something, the quiet Australian, right? I don't think the quiet Australian actually has a voice or it has the machinations of being able to have a voice so that they can actually connect with our political leaders to get the accountability that they need. Right. And this is the fundamental issue, right? Because you normally have fringe groups who are the most vocal, who have the mechanisms to be able to influence and shape politics. I've spoken to a lot of politicians over the years, and I don't think any of them really represent people like me or my cohort. And I would say we're the quiet Australians.
Yeah, well, it's the old saying, right? The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yeah. So demand more.
Demand more.
Complain more.
No, but be informed. Like there is no dearth of information. In the palm of our hands, we can access all the total sum of human knowledge.
Yeah.
Right? Now, yes, to your point earlier, Liam, there's some charlatans out there, but be discerning. But at the same time, I understand people don't necessarily have the bandwidth when they're focusing on, getting the kids fed and to bed.
Yep, I get it.
And all of those little things, those complexities of life. And I think that's part of what our political system, by inertia, has made worse is because it's playing on people not being engaged because they're too busy.
At Invictus Australia, we're all about supporting veterans and their families through the power of sport. Whether it's helping veterans stay connected with their local communities, assisting them in their transition to civilian life, or promoting mental and physical well-being, we're here to support them. From grassroots programs to international sporting competitions, Invictus Australia empowers veterans to take on new challenges, stay active and thrive. Join us in building a stronger, more inclusive community through sport, because together we are unconquerable. Visit invictusaustralia.org to find out more.
So are we going to see, and we'll round out with this because it's very much housing, and housing being, to your point, that probably the major driver which will shape the outcomes of the federal election. Are we going to get Treasury-orientated policy around, we'll tax over here and we'll make 40,000 new things over here? Like, is anyone on both sides of government going to stand up with a 50 to 100-year plan around resolving the housing crisis? So all we're going to be debating is around fringe-type tactical applications of deploying Australians' taxpayer dollars rather than someone standing up and actually making change.
And I can tell you why, because it's easier when the aggregate of GDP line go up. And that's at the end of the day, that's all.
You sell success.
Yeah.
So we just got to be chasing headlines.
Yeah.
Okay. So what does it all mean for property investors? If you're investing in property, you probably do okay. There's going to be demand.
You're doing pretty well. Yeah.
It's going to be demand probably. They expect to get taxed more. Maybe if there's a change of government, but it's all state-based stuff anyway. But you're seeing a swing now to Liberal on the states. I think Northern Territory.
Northern Territory, Country Liberals,
and
Queensland.
Yeah.
WA is due for
Min's doing a pretty reasonable job here in New South Wales.
WA is due for an election in February, March-ish.
Okay.
So that'll intersect with the federal election. Yeah. How that plays out, we'll have to wait and see, because basically WA is keeping the country afloat at this point.
There you go, because it's got all the stuff.
Don't buy that event. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's bring Steve back every now and then.
Yeah. Regular contributor.
I'm just more confused now about what's going on.
Oh yeah.
Let's see someone do something. That's all I asked for.
You guys got into quite a fierce disagreement about 40 minutes ago.
Yeah, we did. Are we disagreeing?
I looked across the table, and I know our listeners don't know what I experienced, but the eyes were locked on. People are leaning into their microphones, elbows on table, almost like a bit of a chest poking kind of almost
shirt fronting.
Shirt fronting.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you what, after Christmas, I won't be shirt fronting anybody.
Keep your shirt on.
But you guys have positioned a narrative that I think a lot of younger Australians would subscribe into, and I certainly have sympathies for that. I don't want to sound as though I don't.
Yeah.
I get it, right? But if you go back through every generation, they will have a similar narrative. Maybe different moving parts and different sort of aspects of it, but there will be a similar narrative, right? And as you know, as people grow up, they become more and more conservative.
Well, that's the theory.
That's the theory.
Yeah. What's the old saying? If you're
not a liberal when you're 18, you don't have a heart.
And if you're not a conservative when you're 35, you don't have a brain.
Yeah.
I think that's a bit of an oversimplification and it insults people's intelligence. But
it's tough.
broadly,
It's tough for people out there, and the cost of living crisis. I don't want to talk that down. I'll call it just the cost of living. Is it a crisis? Depends which lens you view it through. But if this is the way it's going to be for the period of time ahead of us, well, I'd say
it can't be a crisis.
It can't be a crisis for 5 years. It's just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
So be careful of the headlines and.
do your research.
Hold your politicians accountable. Australia, you get an opportunity to vote in a few months' time. Let's vote proper. Whether or not there's anyone I'd particularly vote for right now, I don't know. I don't give my politics away. But,
Get informed.
I'd like to see more from our politicians and any people out there. There's armchair pollies out there. It's a commendable career to court public service. So if you think you can do it better, put your hand up.
Yeah.
And
By
have
all
a red
means,
hot go. Have a red hot go. But Steve Kuper, Government Affairs Manager at Momentum Markets, thanks for your time. Liam, plenty of stories.
So many
write up on.
stories.
Yeah. You look fatigued with this whole thing. It's a big first podcast for 2025. We've got to set us up well.
I had some things I wanted to say, and I thought it would just be better for you and Steve to fight it off.
Do I
back my mate? Do I back the boss? Why?
The problem is Steve's a lot smarter than I am and a lot more informed. I typically, like most things, I don't really know what I'm talking about.
You're the silent assassin.
I'll have my opinion. But thanks for tuning in, everyone. smartpropertyinvestment.com to you. More of that for 2025. Let us know what you want as well. It's what we need to know. Like, do people want more of these sort of conversations? We can bring people in that probably know more about stuff than us.
Liam.Garman@momentummmedia.com.au. Reach out if you have any feedback or anything you want to hear more of.
And I know a lot of it's funny how many political staffers go, "Oh, Phil, I listen to your podcast." I go, you might get the same, Liam, and so for all those political staffers, all politicians that tune to this, come and have a yarn to us. Any side of politics. This is going to be an election which is going to be fought on housing policy and the very important role of property investors in shaping that. So,
and we don't bite. We're really nice guys.
Come and have a chat.
Yeah.
Anyone. I'd thoroughly enjoy it. Get in touch with Liam. Come and have a chat. It'd be funny how quickly they'll come out of the woodwork when they know that 250,000 downloads on this podcast every month of people involved in property investment.
It's funny how that's a bit of a carrot.
It's funny. Anyway, smartpropertyinvestment.com to you. You can follow us on social media as well. We'll see you next time. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.